Our guest this morning is Mariana Atencio. Her book, Perfectly You, Embracing the Power of Being Real. Mariana, good morning and welcome to the OPT Network.
Good morning to you. Buenos dias, as we would say in Spanish. I'm so thrilled and blessed to be with you this morning.
Absolutely. I love the Spanish throughout the book, and then you tell us what it means, and then I went to some translations so I could really pronounce some of the words. But here's where I want to start. I want to start with your dad, because everything that you have morphed into and everything that you are becoming is in large part because of your dad and your parents. And here's what you write on page 196 about your dad. And we are sorry for the loss of your dad, but this was so incredibly touching. And here's where I want to start. You write, "Papi, it's impossible to express how I feel. There is no measure that can quantify what you mean to me. No song, poem, painting, or sunset that encompasses how much I love you. Thank you 1,000 times because you didn't give us a house. You and Mommy gave us a home. Thank you for teaching us to be real. You say what we say what we mean with respect and without fear, to fight for what we want, working hard to achieve it without envying anyone else." Tell me about that moment and when you wrote that.
So I wrote that literally the day after I lost him, after he fought in the ICU for 3 weeks in Venezuela, in South America, where we're from. He got the flu and he was so healthy, would work out every day, practically never got sick. I got the flu, that horrible strain of the flu that was going around last year. Didn't know he had the flu. He lived in Venezuela with my mom, went back after Christmas holiday, and we lost him after 3 weeks because of the shortage of medicine in Venezuela, which is undergoing a huge crisis right now. And after I lost him, people on social media had been following our journey because we were also forced to literally beg on social media for medicine because it's impossible to find down there. And I write about that in the book. And when I had to finally post on social media, which made it real, that I had physically lost him, I was like, how am I going to announce this to the world? How am I going to really come to terms with this fracture, the biggest challenge so far in my life, this void? So I didn't have the words, and I talk for a living. I usually do have the words. So that's why I wrote, there is no measure to describe your love. And the whole book I dedicate to him because, as you say, it's a lot about family values, which is what I instill in my reporting. And when I was figuring out how I was going to dedicate the book to him, I didn't want a long sort of note on the first page. And I said, my dad to me, like my papi, is like one of those big sequoia trees, you like want to physically hug it, but you can't because it's so large and it's like deeply rooted on earth, but always pushing toward the sky. So I summed it up in this one line that I want to read to you. This book is for papi. Love is infinite. So is our bond. So for your viewers and for whoever is listening, I'm sure that under different circumstances than the Venezuela crisis, everyone can relate to loss. And hopefully everyone can relate to the kind of love that is infinite and goes beyond what's on earth, beyond time and everything that is physical and finite. And that's what my dad meant to me.
And so when you rewind your life and you give us a real look at Caracas, Venezuela, the good times and the times that were really hard. But your dad understood intrinsically that you would need more. And so he set out to give you more. Talk about the more.
He set out to give me the world. He realized that this country that we lived in, which is so beautiful and was so prosperous, was coming to terms with difficult times because of the division that was starting to become apparent between people. And when I was 7 years old, he had studied high school here in the United States. So he wanted to give me the gift of words and of the English language to be able to have opportunities beyond what Venezuela offered. And he was really just an admirer of America and what this country stands for. And that's the gift that he gave to me. When I was 7 years old, and I'm the oldest, he said, Mariana, I'm going to send you somewhere for the summer. I used to go to Catholic school throughout the year. And he said, this summer, you're going to go to a place where nobody speaks Spanish because I want you to learn a different language, and I want you to learn about other cultures and other people out there and about this wonderful place called the United States of America.
And so but at 7 years old, though, how does your little 7-year-old mind process the fact that I'm going to this place that my dad has described as just amazing, but I don't know anybody? I don't speak the language?
It was pretty, it was pretty sort of, I guess, exciting and terrifying. I talk about it in one of my TED Talks about, all I really know, because Caracas is a 2.5-hour flight from Miami, Florida. So all I really knew before that was TV in English, shows like Gilligan's Island and The Brady Bunch that I would watch back in Venezuela because my dad wanted us to, start sort of hearing the language and stuff. And all I really knew was Miami, Florida. And Disney, which we had gone to, I think, once. So when he said to me, like, you're going to go to camp in the United States, I was like, yes, I'm going to go to where Mickey Mouse lives. Like, that was my reference. And on top of everything, he sent me with my little sister who was 6. So I just never had a choice about being afraid because I had my little sister to take care of. So I think since the very beginning, I sort of put on a brave face. And I have this memory of this car driving in the woods because, of course, the twist in this whole story is he didn't send us to Miami, Florida. He sent us to Brainerd, Minnesota.
Not Brainerd, even warm in Minnesota. He sent you to the cold part of the country.
You have to get to Minneapolis and then drive. And I remember driving in the woods and saying to myself, like, they're just going to leave us and go? Like, I don't understand how this is going to work. But from the very first day that I saw those big lakes and things that to me were America, like Dairy Queen, and my little sister bawling, of course, and saying to myself, like, I have to adapt here to take care of her, but also to soak all of this in. But it was such a culture shock because from that moment on, I became so aware that I was different from the other kids in that environment. Every other kid, we had to go, there was this big sort of campfire on the first night, and everybody had to stand up and say where they were from. And I think that something like 80% of the kids were from somewhere in Minnesota, because if you sent your kid to camp in Brainerd, Minnesota, most likely you're from Minnesota. Sure. We were practically like the only black-haired kids in the whole camp. And I remember that the camp director got up and said, kids, we have a very international camp this year. The Atencios are here from Venezuela. And people just looked at us as if we were from another planet. So I talk a lot about that in my TED Talk. And it's really resonated with people because, again, I think for those who are watching, you always remember that moment, be it in the playground, if you were sent to summer camp, if you were sent across the country to your cousin's house, whatever it may be, in high school, where you felt different for whatever reason. And it's so funny how, as a little kid, you try to adapt, you try to change who you are because you want to fit in, and nobody wants to be the kid that's weird, right? Nobody wants to be the kid that gets asked, like, do you go to school in a canoe? Which is what kids sometimes would ask me. So after that experience, year after year, because we kept on going to the summer camp every summer. And then I would go back home, of course, and have all of these experiences to talk about, right? And I knew the English language. And then that was something that made me different from my friends back home as well. So as years went by, I started becoming more keenly aware of how that just made me special. And it was something to be celebrated. And that's what I really work in ingraining in every single one of my stories in my journalistic career, is to be a bridge of understanding between people and to remind people, and especially women, especially diverse women, that what makes us different actually is something to be celebrated and not to be ashamed of or hidden.
Absolutely. One of the things that you wrote in the book that really made me think was you asked the question, what makes you special? Why did you pose that question?
What makes you perfectly you? It's the basis of the book, because after traveling around the world, talking to people, and especially women from all walks of life, I see us struggling with perfection so much. And I thought to myself, what is really perfection? It's not the absence of flaws, in my view. It's the commitment to give our best in everything we do. I see it with you, and just the fact that you are, the way that you are as an interviewer, as a motivator, as a communicator, that you read my book from cover to cover before doing this interview. I see it with the work I do covering the border and immigration, and with my speeches. Like, we give our best. That is perfection. So I ask women to, we're so used to, first of all, we're so ready to give kind words and compliments to other women, but we're relentless with ourselves. And we rarely take a moment to really analyze ourselves, because there's so many roles that we have to play, hats that we have to wear. We rarely take a pause to see, what is our own magic formula? What are the ingredients to our secret sauce? It's a simple question that I ask women. Sometimes, it's even better to sit down with a piece of paper and a pencil and just write it down. Like, what are the things that make you feel happy about yourself, or challenges that you've overcome that are also kind of seen as negatives, but are part of your secret sauce and are part of what makes you who you are? So it's a great exercise and the premise for the whole book. And I actually tapped into how there was a thirst for this message when I gave my 2017 TED Talk, literally titled that, What Makes You Special? And it went viral. It's been seen more than 10 million times around the world, translated in 10 languages, just with that premise. What makes you special? What makes you perfectly you? What makes you who you are? And it's gotten people all over the world, and especially women, really celebrating them, because that's the second step. Once you figure out what these ingredients to your secret sauce are, you have to choose to wear them on your sleeve every single morning when you wake up, every single meeting that you go to, every single family dinner that you have, because that's the example that we want to give to our kids, to other people, and frankly, celebrate ourselves and what we have to bring to the table.
And it's really very hard for most of us to celebrate ourselves. It's easy to celebrate others, but very hard.
Absolutely.
And I think it's indoctrinated in us
And
not
I think
to celebrate
that we
ourselves.
are made to feel guilty about thinking about just us, not our role as mothers or sisters or daughters or wives, is to take a moment to yourself and to say, what do I have that's unique that I bring to the table? What do I want from my life beyond the other roles that I have to play vis-a-vis other people?
Absolutely.
And we are made to feel guilty about that process, but we shouldn't, because if you put yourself first, if you are fulfilled, if you are aware of the wonderful tools that you have to work with, then that's going to make you a better whatever it is you set out to do in the world as a woman.
Absolutely. One of the things that people may not know if they haven't followed you on social media, and heavens knows that there are millions of people around the world who are following you, but they may not really understand. You see, we could watch you on the news, we can see your passion for people and sharing stories, but what people really may not know are the struggles that you and your family have had in your efforts to live the American dream. Talk a little bit about that.
I think we all have struggles. You, me, everyone who's watching.
But here's the thing, though, Mariana. When we see people on television, we don't really see them as strugglers. You know what I'm
And when
saying?
we and nowadays with social media, you see
The
a
best. You see the best
beautiful
of everything.
photo
Yeah.
on Instagram, and you're like, oh, she has it figured out. You have no idea how many times I go talk to a lot of students in college and just the conferences that I give in the United States and around the world, and people are like, no, you have it figured out, and you're like, no, no, no. In this book, I talk about how I was laid off from my first job in journalism that I ever landed in the United States, that my visa depended on. So I was undocumented, unemployed, and practically undocumented. I didn't end up being undocumented, but unemployed and without a green card less than 10 years ago.
Right.
So
And
when
things could have turned out very differently for you.
absolutely, I always say it's luck and hard work and optimism. I'm a believer in that, the energy that you put out there to the world, that's what you harvest, and what you give what you get back. That's something that my dad really believed in as well and instilled in me. But imagine finding yourself coming from a prosperous country like Venezuela was. Venezuela was the longest standing democracy in Latin America, throughout even the 90s. So it's as if somebody being from the United States would tell you, like, one day, God forbid, your country crumbles, like you have no country to go back to, you have to leave. Like, this was all what my 20s were like, and I never thought that I would find myself in that situation. I had to reset my life entirely, rethink what I wanted, who I was. And that's why the question, what makes you special, comes from, because I had to pose myself that question in the midst of the struggle that we were going through as a family, and that I was going through really by myself here in the United States. So being laid off during the recession, my sister was in this horrific hit and run accident in New York City, and she's practically my twin. We talked about it in the prior segment. And then ultimately my father's death. But through it all, as I'm dealing with that, it's covering stories, being literally in the front lines of stories like Ferguson, Missouri, like the student protests in Hong Kong, where I was tear gassed, like the election of Barack Obama and the election of Donald Trump, and what that means for what that meant or means for the immigrant community and the Latino community here. So it's through my pain, empathizing with people so much more, and bringing humanity to the debate by literally giving them a voice and using my platform humbly to make people put themselves in their shoes.
And let me tell you, in the book, it really shines through. If most people who understand journalism and who've ever been in a newsroom know that newsrooms come with so much, what word? There's not a lot of compassion in newsrooms and telling stories. And if you're not careful, you can become jaded and you can lose feeling for the people. But in your stories and the way that you've told your story in this book, I still feel the compassion. I don't feel, the sarcasm or all of the feelings. And I'm not saying that everybody in news has that, but it was my experience that when you're in a newsroom and you're dealing with so many stories on so many levels, you can become desensitized. That's the word that I was looking for.
It does happen because also you're looking at ratings, you're looking at clicks, you're looking at what other networks are doing, and newsrooms, you're in that sort of bubble, you're not out. That's why I believe in journalism of the people. I believe in going out there where news happens. That's why I do what I do. And
how have you kept from being desensitized?
So I fervently believe, people in newsrooms, especially at the national level where I am, it's so competitive. And for a lot of people, it becomes about quantity and not the quality of the stories that you're telling. I said to myself after, almost 10 years in this business, after working in Spanish and then crossing over to English, saying to myself, for me, it's about quality. It's about putting important stories out there, even if it takes more days to do, more days to plan, more days to get to the heart of the story. I don't want to be that person where you say Mariana Atencio has covered 365 stories for 365 days of the year. I would rather have you say Mariana has covered 20 stories, but she's really made a difference through those stories. She's followed up with those people. She's gone back, not just parachute in and then never really caring what happened to that community. I realized early on that my role was to make people care about my stories, because if not, what's the point? I want us all to understand that whatever happens anywhere will affect us at some point, because we're all human beings and more interconnected through technology and politics and the environment, more and more. So the last thing that I want is for someone to look at one of my reports and to go like, oh, thank God that didn't happen here.
Right.
I want people to understand how, wow, that child that was just brought across the border and whose parents had to put him or her on a raft to make it to America, like that could be my child. So it's a lot about how you build bridges and make meaningful connections and still tell stories that people will relate to.
Absolutely.
Showcasing their values. That's what I think my mission is. So for anyone out there who, I think it's important for, especially for minority communities, underrepresented communities. And we were talking about this before, which is part of the incredible work that you do, realizing that our stories are also worth telling. Because if there is only one or a few storytellers that all look the same, that's how you also become desensitized to what is happening in the other communities. But there's diversity in the storytellers. There'll be diversity and more compassion, I believe, in the stories as well.
Everything in the book, step by step, opens your life and your family's life up to this journey. But on the journey of figuring out how to stay in this country, how to be employed, you meet somebody that you had seen on television, on Spanish-speaking television, that absolutely gives you a boost and helps another bridge to be built. Tell us about that.
So I was not doing well in this new job. That was the first job that I got after being let go. It was still the recession. I had moved down to Miami to try and climb up in this new network, but I just wasn't making the cut. And I remember like literally feeling so overwhelmed at the office that I just sat in my car in the parking lot and I cried and cried and cried and said, how am I going to pay the apartment that I rented, the car that I leased? Like I was afraid of getting fired.
And let me just set that up, Mariana, because you're coming from New York to Miami. And your mom is so worried because she says, you're not a good driver. You don't need to be driving.
I'd never even driven I had been in the United States. That was, I think, my third year in the United States. I didn't have a license here because I learned how to drive in South America, where my mom always says street lights are a suggestion. There's no stop signs. There's no stop signs in Venezuela. Literally, they don't exist. So she was so worried about me just even renting a car for the interview. And it was at a time where the Uber didn't exist. This was about, I think, 8 years ago, that I remember like walking around with like just cash, like the $1 bills to be able to pay the cab drivers because she didn't want me to rent a car. So I was literally by myself in Miami, this new city, and wasn't making the cut at work. My visa depended on that job. So if I got laid off or fired again, then my visa would be canceled and I would be at risk of being deported again. So many things were riding on this job. I'm crying in this car in the parking lot, and I see this woman who is the most recognizable face in Spanish news, walking almost like walking on air. She was holding 2 bags with her different pairs of shoes because she recorded 2 shows on that day. And I remember just telling myself, like, get out of this car and go meet her. Even if you're just holding the door for her to enter the building, I just felt this urge to do something. And I ran to the door, opened it for her. She just saw me, and I must have looked like a mess. And she said, do you want to come into my office? I just followed her, and I sat down, and Mariana's my name, but she automatically called me Marianita, which is like little Mariana. I was a
Wow.
little digital reporter. It was my, one of the first jobs I ever had here. And it's like the lowest of the lowest points on the totem pole.
But
And
she meant that, it felt like, as a term of endearment.
absolutely. No, absolutely. And she said to me, at this point in your career, you need to say yes to whatever comes your way. Later on, you will find out about the power of no, but you need to have what she coined the yes attitude. And I remember sitting there and thinking, this is exactly what I needed to hear today.
But let's stop there, though, because when you got this job, you were like, this is not really what you wanted to do. And you were even grappling with whether you could do it.
Because and I think a lot of people watching will feel that this is true for them as well. The imposter syndrome paralyzes us. I have spoken to so many university students who tell me things like, literally off stage, go, Mariana, I think they made a mistake in my application and I'm not supposed to be here.
Right.
And you have to tell them, take that out of your head. It is the biggest obstacle to your success.
And the biggest
imposter syndrome.
lie. It is the lie
And
from
it
the enemy.
lies
Yes.
absolutely between here and here. Leave the imposter syndrome at the door, because you are self-sabotaging the opportunity to be in this institution or the opportunity to take on this new role in your job. And it is women who suffer from it more than men. So when I started out in this job, it is not what I wanted to do. I had studied broadcasting, so I thought that I was going to be reporting in front of a camera for local news or what have you. And this digital job is not what I wanted. I was carrying a camera around, recording what other people were doing. And she said to me, the way to beat the imposter syndrome, the way to beat all of these doubts that are plaguing you right now, and you self-sabotaging yourself, is to say yes. And later I read Shonda Rhimes' The Year of Yes, and I'm like, absolutely. This is what Maria Elena meant with the yes attitude. So every single opportunity that came my way, as you mentioned, even things that I thought were beneath me, like I remember somebody asked me to record a party at their house, like one of these executives. And I said, wow, I have a scholarship from Columbia Journalism School, a master's degree.
Right.
And they want me to stand there at some party and like record it.
Who do they think that they are?
But I said yes. And that day, one of these executives saw me in the corner of the apartment and said, this girl is up for anything. She doesn't think anything is beneath her.
Right.
And later on, they asked me to form part of this investigative unit, which was the first at Univision. And I was like, I have no idea how to do investigations. It's not what I want to do. But I remember what Maria Elena said. And I just told myself, like, just say yes. Just say yes. You never know where the light might come in through the door. You don't even know which door sometimes, but the universe will prompt you to go in the right direction. I fervently believe that God is pulling the strings of everything. And by having the yes attitude, you're ready to prop that door open wherever it opens. That job at Investigative led me to win a Peabody Award, which is something that in journalism, people aspire to their whole lives. So that's when it made sense to me that the yes attitude will open doors. And for those who are watching now, think about if you're stuck, if you're wanting to make a pivot in your life, personally or professionally, adopt the yes attitude. And I am sure, I will bet anything that it will take you places.
Absolutely. And you know what I took away from the yes attitude? It was only preparation. All of the things that you didn't want to do, that you thought I'm bigger than this, or I just simply don't want to do it. I can't do it. This is not what I came to do. They were just preparation for such a time as this.
And sometimes we're so impatient. I'm
Oh,
impatient with a capital I.
me too.
So it's just sometimes you have to go through the steps and go through the motions. And that's a part of the yes attitude. But if you block yourself off from these opportunities, then you will really be stuck.
And so when you speak to people who look at your journey, and in the book you even write how some people really criticized you. A friend of yours had said, Mariana, sit down. I want to share this with you. People who have criticized the way that you came to America and thought that you were just some rich girl that wasn't Latina enough. What do you say to those people that think that they understand the depth of your story?
Honestly, I try to get past those criticism with hard work and just having a positive attitude and fulfilling my passion. I don't even, or I try. It's hard to not get bogged down by some comments sometimes because, for example, in this specific case that you cite, this person mentioned my family, my grandparents, my husband, things that weren't even about me that were just so hurtful because they don't deserve to be dragged through the mud with things that are unfactual, or not factual rather. But for me, I am so certain of my purpose and who I am today. And this book has led me to that, which is why I recommend every single person watching is figuring out what you are made of and what is unique that you have to give to the world. And I think about everything as a service, as I am meant to do this. And listen, as a woman, we are bigger targets. There are people that are going to say that you are not Black enough, not Latina enough, or, why is your hair straight? Why are you from Venezuela? Why do you speak English or Spanish? Sometimes it's even women about other women, which I think is one of the things that, we really have to work on as a society. I always tell women, like, let's not tear each other down. Let's use our differences as blocks for our communities to stand on, not rocks to throw at one another.
Oh, I love that.
So I am keenly aware of my purpose, and it's with passion and hard work and kindness that I am blocking out all the haters today.
Absolutely. And so what's next for you? What is next for you?
That is a great question. Right now, I am focused on bringing this message as far and wide as it'll go. The book was released June 11th. So, and both in Spanish and English. So there's so many communities that I want to service with this book. And I've seen such a big appetite for the message. Every single month I'm out on the road talking to people, bringing the message to them, that is my goal right now. And then also, of course, as a journalist, because through and through, I will always be a journalist. We're living in a scary yet fascinating time where I think we need, going back to your earlier point, more people that care, more people that bring context and compassion and connection to what is happening in places like the border and in our communities and in our inner cities, that I want to continue to be of service every single day and in every way that I can.
Absolutely. How cathartic was this book for you?
Oh, you have no idea. I cried. The audiobook was incredibly cathartic because I'm literally in the audio booth. It took me 7 hours, but I also had to go through it all again in another language, Spanish. So I narrated both audiobooks in 2 languages. So going through my dad's passing again and my sister's accident again and what happened with my home country crumbling again was just me bawling in the audio booth, literally. But it gave me so much perspective about one thing that I think is so important for this time that we're living in America right now, which is I lost my home country and my dad because of division and polarization. Like, ultimately, that is what brought about the crisis and the shortages of medicine and food. And now that I see some of that same division in this, my adopted country, this book is that is my answer to that. And for people to realize that we need a message to rally around, and we don't want to see that happen here. So if you want to understand some of the forces that can tear us apart, I urge you to read the book.
And
If
we
you
haven't
want-
even scratched the surface. There's so much more depth in the book. And I recommend it for everyone, but most especially women who struggle with finding out what makes them special. This book will make you think about it, and you just give us such light and such lift. And for that, we say thank you.
Thank you so much. I really needed to hear you today. So thank you for that gift.
Well, we're blessed to be a blessing. Before you got to go, let people know how they can connect with you, because you're everywhere. And wait, and I don't want people to miss the Go Like Mariana at the end of every chapter. That is, it's perfection.
It's the takeaways for people, because I also didn't want to just put my story out there. I wanted people to have takeaways of, okay, even in chapters like when I met my husband or when I lost my dad, like what does that mean for you guys as readers?
Right.
So it's takeaways at every point, and I really wanted that. And then in terms of us making connection, because I believe really that more than a like on an Instagram page, I want to make meaningful connections with you guys. You can find me on all social media platforms. It's my name, Mariana Atencio, all together. So Mariana and then Atencio. I'm on Twitter, Snapchat, Instagram, Facebook, all like that, Mariana Atencio. Instagram is the one where I respond the fastest, and I really try to respond to every comment and every DM. So I'm eager to connect with you guys. That's the whole point of the book. So if you are hesitating whether to write or not, or to leave a comment or to DM me, do it, because that's the way that we build community.
There you go. Maria Atencio, perfectly you, embracing the power of being real. Mariana, thank you so much.
Thank you so much. I really loved it.
I did too. Hey, everybody, stay on point.